Hi, grade 4. So today we're going to be talking about our decimal place value of tenths. So this is probably the first time you might have heard the word tenths before. But in grade 4, you guys are, one of your I can statements is that you can represent and describe decimals to the 10th place value and then later to the 100th place value, which we'll go over next time. So when we talk about place value, we've talked about this before at the very beginning of the year and kind of throughout the year of how we represent numbers, how we know our numbers. So we typically start our place value with the unit of 1. Hopefully you guys all remember. And you're like, Ms. King, you wrote it in the wrong spot, but just bear with me. So we have our ones place. What is the unit to the left of our ones place? Hopefully you guys all said 10. My pencil's breaking. How satisfying was it to watch that pencil break on video? Okay, so we have our tens place value chart next. Then after tens comes our hundreds. Thank you for saying that to your computer screen. I heard some of you. Okay, so we have ones place, our tens place, and our hundreds place. So today I'm going to be using the example of money to help us with our decimals. Okay, money is a place that you do see decimals in real life. When you go to the store and you want to buy, I don't know, a pop, maybe it's $2.30. So we see our decimal all the time in prices and with money. So that's the example we're going to use today. So when we talk about our ones place, we're going to use the example of $1 to kind of draw attention to 1. Okay, so if I'm moving from my ones place to my tens place, so if I want to think about $10, a $10 bill, one of those nice purple $10 bills, nice and crisp, how many dollars do I need in order to make $10? Hopefully I heard you say I need $1 in order to make $10. Okay? Just like how many of those crisp purple bills, Miss King doesn't have a $10 bill, I'm sorry, do I need to make $100? How many tens do I need in order to make 100? We'll think about our times tables. I need 10 groups of 10, 10 times 10, in order to make 100, right? So we know that the pattern in this place value chart is that every time we move left, it's like timesing by 10. We need 10 of this thing in order to go this way. We need 10 of this thing in order to go this way. Hopefully you guys are all with me so far. Okay, so just think back to the money. We need 10 $1, 10 loonies, in order to make a $10 bill. Okay? So when we think of our decimal place value, and that's why I left this big space over here, because even though we don't have it right now, there is a secret decimal place directly after the ones. Okay? Think about it like your age. Okay, so Miss King turned 27, practice some French, 27 in October, sorry, forgot my birthday. So Miss King turned 27 in October, but she's not actually 27 years old. She would be 27 plus, or like with the decimal, the amount of months since then, okay? So when we think back to money, is there a smaller unit of money than $1? I hope you all said yes. So when we think about our unit after, it's called the tenths column, okay? And back to our analogy of money, if we want to think of our ones place being 1, then our tenths column is going to be represented by our dime, which is worth how many cents? 10 cents, okay? So think about our tenths as being a dime, okay? How many dimes do you need in order to make $1? How many dimes, 10 cents, do you need in order to make $1? Hopefully you realize that you need 10 dimes in order to make $1. So notice how the pattern is continuing from before. So even in our decimal digits, the pattern still remains the same, okay? So that's our place value chart, but let's go into an example to help us kind of understand this a little bit further and the different ways that we can represent decimal place values. So I'm going to start with the fraction 3/10. Okay. So we're going to write it as a fraction because that's one thing about this transition from fractions to decimals is they're very closely related, as we'll see in the coming weeks or even today. So our fraction 3/10, okay, is clearly 3/10, okay? Just as a visual, we can think of it as, you know, those 3/10, right? 3 dimes. In your Math Makes Sense book, you're going to occasionally see them use base 10 blocks in order to represent these fractions. Okay, so you might see them use those 10 place base 10 blocks, the ones that are long and skinny. So 3/10 being represented by that. Okay, we'll just pretend there's 10 lines there, I'm not sure. Okay, so you'll see that in your Math Makes Sense book that they're using 3/10 here to represent this fraction. Okay, we are going to be talking about decimal grids in a little bit, where they use, and think of it as just like we would draw like a tiny little square for our ones, like our base 10 blocks. Think of the tenths as like one of those tiny little squares cut into 10. Okay, so when we think about that square, thinking about squares, what a good morning. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Look at that perfect square. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Perfect. Okay, that's definitely not a square. I'm sorry, guys, but we'll just pretend it is. Okay, so I could also, just like I know from fractions, I can split my square into 10, and then I'd color in, how many of them? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so these all represent the fraction 3/10. But now we're going to think about it as a decimal place. So how can we write it as a decimal? Okay, so remember my example of our dimes. So before we had our $1 and we had our dimes here, right, in our tenths. So think about it as putting my 3/10 in that tenths column, in that tenth square. Okay, so do I have a dollar here? Hopefully you said no. I don't have a dollar. So in my ones column, I can't leave it blank because we need to have something to the left of our decimal. We can't just have a decimal because then we don't really know what it is. It just looks like one of those wisdom dots that are floating in the air, right? So we need to have a 0 there. We don't have any dollars. We just have 3/10. So 0 decimal 3 is how we're going to write it as. And I'm sure if I asked you guys to read this fraction to me, maybe I'd hear 0.3, like I just said, or maybe I'd hear 0.3. Both of those are commonly used in conversation, but when we talk about decimals in math class, we don't say 0.3 or 0.3. we actually say 0 and 3/10. Okay, so remember that our decimal point is represented by the word and when we read our decimal. Okay, so when we hear that word and, we know there's a decimal place there. So 0 and 3/10. Okay, of course we could also think of it as a number line. So if we had a number line from 0 to 1, and then we split it up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, we could also say our 0/10 would be, or sorry, 3/10 would be here, not 0/10. Okay, so you could also write it as a number line, which we'll kind of explore and go in further weeks. Okay, so just to review what we've been talking about, we've talked about the decimal place value of tenths and how it is exactly to the right of the decimal place after our ones column. We learned that there are 10 tenths in one whole, and that we can write fractions that are over 10 as a decimal place. So 3/10 could be written as 0 and 3/10, and it can be illustrated using a multiple of different ways. The next example I want you guys to do is the fraction 1/10. Okay, so I want you to think of a way that you could write 1/10 as a decimal and as an illustration. Okay, how would you illustrate 1/10? Are you going to be using base 10 blocks, or are you going to use a fraction grid or a number line? So now it's your turn. I want you to write 1/10 as a decimal and as a picture. Good luck, grade 4s. If you have any questions, please let me or Mrs. Au know. Goodbye.